Hey, welcome to Viking Preparedness. I'm Pastor Joe Fox, and I just thought I'd show you guys some of the joinery work I've been doing in my house here.
Joe.
Okay, it's not really my house. It's Nick and Esther's house from Fouch-o-matic off-grid. Right? So I get to come here and visit. Thank you guys very much for having me. You know, you're stiffer like on film than you are in person.
Oh yeah?
That, yeah. Stage fright or something. I love you, man. So we've been hanging out here. You guys have been wonderful hosts, and I'll put their information down below. I feel short sitting next to you.
You are.
I've had people. I am to you. I've had people come meet me.
Yeah.
And they say, "Wow, you're not as tall as I thought you were." And I'm like, "What? I don't film like this, you know, looking up at me." But you know, the presence, right? But you're a pretty big guy. So the question.
Yeah.
What made you guys decide to come all the way from back east, however much of that you want to talk about, or not, to here, to this? I've been getting the tour, thank you. It's gorgeous, it's out here in the middle of nowhere. Leave it at that. Again, let you put out as much information as you want. I thought it was hard to get to Shofar Mountain. It's a little bit more difficult to get here, and the air is
a little remote.
A little bit thinner.
Yeah.
But what made you guys decide to come out here, live in close to the wilderness, off-grid? Because we've been talking about that for an hour.
Well, we didn't really necessarily move out here to be off-grid specifically.
That's what I said.
Right. So we did it, I guess, a lot like you, just that we wanted to be there, so we found the space, and we got there, and we just thought that we'd make our way on sort of minimal needs.
Do sound like me.
Yeah. So, and then, you know, as we got a little more established, we couldn't afford it. It's a big cost to bring power in here. All of our, well, not all, but many of our neighbors have power. It's not, you know, we're not that remote, but it was a big expense, and we'd already been going without it for a couple of years. And then we just thought, you know, well, let's just stay that way and keep it simple and see, you know, if we are going to invest the money, we might as well invest in a way that we're producing rather than just investing to sign up for somebody else's utility.
I think that was you and I talking. I don't think it was you and I. Whatever. It was us talking about how we use a compost toilet at Shofar Mountain, and at first it sounded weird and icky, and it is nothing now. There's like no way I would spend the money to put in like a real septic system now, because there's just like it's not a big deal. And it's like you said, you didn't have the power here, and now it's like, well, I have the money, I could do this with it, or I could do that with it.
Right.
And you also find out what the advantages are. You know, we found a real advantage to having not so much electrical noise and distraction. Our first winter here was hard for a lot of reasons, but sitting around the fire at 7 o'clock on winter nights, just spending time together was not one of the worst things. It was one of the best.
Right, and it's something that we just wouldn't have done had we even had solar power that first winter, you know. Now that we have some solar, we definitely have our distractions, you know. But I think that going cold turkey like that for us was one of the best things we could have done.
We used to say at Shofar Mountain, you've got this really cool washing machine, right? Which is one of your first video?
Yeah.
First video on Fouch-o-matic off-grid, the bicycle-powered washing machine. Yeah. And at Shofar Mountain, we used to literally, we like I had anything to do with it, but the women would like crack ice out of the wash tubs and wash clothes in these wash tubs outside, build a fire to heat up the water and stuff like that. And then we got wonder washers, and we got a little bit more sophisticated. But we used to say, people coming to Shofar Mountain, we're going to make them do their clothes this way for a couple months to go through the process and learn, wow, this wonder washer is awesome compared to that, not compared to my washer back at home. Right. But you and I were talking, that's why I said, oh, we got to film, right? It's like, why are we living off-grid now? Because don't have to. We don't have to. And you said something, I'm not going to steal your thunder, it was good.
So I said that we live this way because it makes us our best selves. I think we've been through some transitions as far as what we think we're doing out here. We use the word homesteading a lot to describe what we're trying to do. And at first we just wanted some control. And we wanted control over what kind of resources we're using and where they're coming from, how we're feeding ourselves, how we're feeding our family. But then once we were able to make choices about what our life really is, we've discovered that we can stretch ourselves to be healthy and capable in ways that are incredibly satisfying.
Right. I think there's something to be said for providing the things you need with your own body and with your wits and the things around you. You know, we're not producing that much of our own food here. You know, I feel like that's a slow process, but even just just getting things done, moving things from place to place, heating your home, doing all that stuff for yourself, with yourself, there's a lot of pride in that, for one, but it just makes it different. You know, you appreciate it so much more, like your Wonder Washer that would be a big step down from
right.
from your Maytag, you know, but you know, it's as soon as you've seen and felt all the energy going into it, it's just different.
And you and I were talking earlier, you know, you've had what I call real jobs, right?
Oh,
you know,
sure.
with the commute and the real money and the you know, the expectations. And for those real jobs, we get paid real money. Here's a salary. You can go buy things. But that's what you do. You take your life, you go pour it into a job, you get money, and then you buy things with that money.
Right.
As opposed to, like, I started out looking at your joinery, which is awesome, and you could pay somebody to do that.
I certainly could.
Whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Or you can be, because we've been talking about this, getting old and, you know,
Right.
you could be sitting here, an old man in a rocking chair someday with your great-grandchildren running around going, yeah, I built that in 2015, or whatever. I mean, there's a deep satisfaction that comes from that.
Right, and part of the world that we were coming from when we had jobs that paid us a salary and we, you know, poured all of ourselves into it, we were renters. You know, we rented other people's homes and set money on fire, essentially, so that we could have the privilege of staying in their crappy house and not have the ability to change anything about our circumstances. You know, so part of what we were looking for when we moved just out into the woods, not necessarily looking to be off grid, was some permanence. You know, a place where we could stand and where we could make a go of it, and where we can change our environment and, you know, just make a place of our own.
So, final question, and I didn't tell you about it, but you'll be okay with it. A lot of people look at me on my video and I talk about how you can do this. You know, I try to encourage y'all, you can come do this. You can come live an off-grid life. You can have a better quality life. You can spend more time with your family. You know, you can be healthier. Is it harder? Yes, it's a lot harder. And you've talked about that a lot in your videos. We've talked about it a little bit. But I always tell people, you can do this. And the harshest comment for me to rebuke, because there's some truth in it, was, well, it's easy for you to say, Pastor Joe, you've got a military pension. Right, so I've got money coming in, a little bit of money. It's not very much, but you know, it is money coming in. It buys groceries.
Sure.
You're not a trust fund baby, right?
No.
I'm thinking you're not a trust fund baby. We're not from the, you know, millionaire circles.
No.
You don't have a pension coming in.
No.
And yet, and you're raising a family.
Yeah.
You're not really wanting for a whole lot on the life things. I'm sure, you know, we both have, all three of us have things that we give up. But you're doing it. You're what I call regular person. You're a regular woman. What do you tell the people out there that say, oh, you don't understand, I can't do it, man. I'm renting an apartment now that's taking up all my money and I'm trying to feed my kids or whatever.
Right. Well, you gotta, I don't know, really want to. I mean, it's not, you know, like you're saying, it takes a lot of effort, right? So, I guess, like anything in your life, no matter where you are, you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it for free. You know, you gotta put the effort towards it. And if your heart's not in it, it's really just not gonna work. So that's why I think it's hard to convince people that that anybody can do it. I think somebody who feels it's important, who shares the value and the work ethic that it involves, I think they could do it. But I don't know.
If you don't have a lot of money, you have to be prepared for it to take a long time.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's the kind of heartbreaking thing, and I do have a lot of sympathy for people who say, I'd like to do this, but it's really hard. Or I'd like to do this, but I don't have it. So Nick and I made the decision to homestead, not necessarily to be off-grid, but we wanted to get out of our kind of rat race cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a decision to break out of that cycle by changing our lifestyle a full 3 years before we even moved. And at that point, we had student loan debt. At that point, we put ourselves on a crazy hard financial plan. It was hard.
Severe austerity.
So, I mean, for a year, we never went out for a date. We went to, in that whole year, we went to the movies once. And then when we did, it was kind of weird. We're like, did we really ever spend $30 on this?
Yeah.
Why does a Coke cost so much?
Right. Right, but we put ourselves on a really severe financial plan in order to get ourselves to a place where we were out of debt and financially stable and able to make the move. And I don't think we could have done that if we weren't also really feeding ourselves with a dream. You know, we were reading books about what we wanted to do, and we were getting excited about what we wanted to do, and we were doing something together, which made it really worth it.
Right.
But it was not just that we kind of gave up some things, but we gave up some things over time, and that takes a lot of stamina, I think.
And you also said it takes time. Your house looks similar to our house in many ways.
Right.
Undone.
Right.
It's been being built for how long?
Well,
broke ground?
Much, well, we broke ground just over a year ago.
Oh, that's not bad then.
But we cut these trees down 3.5 years ago.
And so you have to be patient. And it's not going to be done this winter, I wouldn't think,
No.
right?
No.
And so it's like you can't have it now if
Right.
you want to have it without a whole lot of money.
Right, there's an adjustment to be made there as far as your expectation of like that instant gratification. It just isn't there.
Right.
So I think that's what most people would be addicted to, is that ability to say, I want that there, now I have it.
And how do we put that in words? You know, because we didn't like figure out totally what we were going to talk about, but that delayed gratification, like you're talking about 3 years and beans and rice not going anywhere, saving our ducks to do things, and I'm willing to live here with an unfinished house. You know, it's like, there's a lot of guys out there who could do something like this. There's a lot of guys who do. They just go live in a cabin somewhere or a trailer or something. There aren't a lot of women. There really aren't a lot of women who are willing to put up with, see, that's their words, right? I'm not going to put up with that. And then, like you said, that's because they don't really understand that it really completes us as people to do it. But we have to be able to delay our, I don't know, what is that, discipline?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to the question of whether women want to do this, because I know you're out there because you email me. You're not emailing Pastor Joe, you're emailing me. You're saying, I want to do this and my husband doesn't want to.
And
so I know you're out there.
My
right?
wife won't do it.
Right, but I know that happens. But when I said that we do this because it makes us our best selves, that really is related to the discipline of patience. And it sounds like that's going to be a burden, and that sounds like it's going to be miserable, and it sounds like you're sitting in a corner for 3 years. But what I've discovered, and maybe Nick has this experience, I don't know, but I am so much calmer and more satisfied with my life when I can kind of rest in a patient, long-form sense of life. Mm-hmm. And we rest in the work, and we feel okay with little things. And you discover when you're in the habit of appreciating little things, you're way happier. Because, you know, I literally fed Pastor Joe peanut butter sandwich and a salad for lunch.
It was awesome.
And that's what we do every day. You know, we've got homemade bread and fresh lettuce from the garden, and we're awesome. You know, that's joyful, that's satisfaction. When you get to be satisfied by little things, you have a better shot at a happy life.
Absolutely.
Well, I promised Nick that I would help him move some heavy things, and so we've been putting that off and putting that off and putting that off. Any final words for the people, either one of you? Don't we look alike, kind of?
Yeah.
I thought about that, a younger version,
Right.
younger, taller, more handsome version
That's
of me.
definitely more handsome, but maybe fast forward and I'll be in his shoes.
Someday.
No, we do encourage people to just to not think that happiness and preparedness are necessarily a choice that you have to make. You don't have to choose between having a happy life and having a prepared life, because at some point there is a place where they coincide. That's the thing I would offer.
Absolutely.
All right, time to get to work. I'll see you out there. I walk up here and turn it off.